Weeks you've ever had, and shouldn't be under any illusions that everything's fine now, everything's fixed. because we still every single week, I hope, Bezrat Hashem now, at the risk of kind of leading to somewhat, hopefully, misunderstood pessimism, being pessimistic. We have to be very, very, I want to be more conscious than ever of how it's true that the world keeps on going, but there's still a lot that's not fixed yet. So this should be the shiur when I dedicate the Leilui Neshama of the two precious Yidden that were killed last week. Liron's cousin, Dalia, who was killed right over here a few weeks ago. Come, there's over here. If you want to grab a chair and sit in the back, it's fine. Whatever is good for you. We have a chassan. In the Hashem. Yasimcha should wipe away all evil in the world. So Leilui Nishmat Dalia Lemkis and Leilui Nishmat, this precious chayal that was killed in Tel Aviv. Almog, right? Almog. So Leilui Nishmatam. We've been getting a lot of calls recently, and most of the calls to try to help and get involved in helping certain situations. There's so many shalom bayis things going on. I feel it everywhere I'm going. And this is a Shabbos. It's before we learn what we're going to learn tonight, but it has to do with the parsha anyway. But this is a Shabbos of davening very strong for shalom bayis, more than ever, really, this week of shalom bayis. And the reason is as follows: the famous Yismach Moshe, the Rebbe Yismach Moshe, was the first Rebbe in the lineage of Satmar. And Shabbos Toldos, he got up to say a Dvar Torah. Then he turned to his son. He said, "Okay, now you say a Vart." And then he turned to his grandson, and he said, "Okay, now you say a Torah." And they saw that after he and then his son and then his grandson said Dvar Torah, there was a sense of completion in the room, and a sense of bitachon that was instilled within whoever was present. So, they asked him, they said, what was Pshat over here? He never did that. So we say in the morning in Valet Zion, it says, Vani zois brisi osam Hashem lakechu shechid lo yamushu mipicha mipi zaracha umipi zera zaracha ad olam. That the words of Torah that I'm placing before you won't yamushu, how would you say? They won't fade away, diminish from your mouth, mipicha, mipi zaracha, from your children's mouth, umipi zera zaracha, and from the mouths of the children of your children, your grandchildren, ad olam. That means it lasts forever. When you see 3 generations together learning Torah. So first of all, it's a big, tremendous chus if, those of you who are grandparents already, and those of us who are grandchildren, and that have our grandparents, the 3 together, sharing words of Torah together is a very, very strong thing. Aval mazak shul, what does that have to do with our parsha? So in our parsha, it's the only parsha in the Torah that for 3 psukim, only for 3 psukim, it lasts for 3 psukim, that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are alive. All together. The 3 of them. And that's why he said, Dafka, this parsha. By the way, when does Avram die? Well, chronologically, he died last week, right? At the end of Chayei Sarah, right? But we know that when they were born, when the boys were born, Avram Avinu was still alive. There's a machlokas if they were 13 or 15 when he actually died. But definitely for 13 or 15 years, he's still alive. Because how do we know this? When Esav comes and he takes that dish from Yaakov Avinu, so what was the dish? Remember? He prepared the lentil soup was a dish for Avelim, for his father, who was sitting Shiva over his father. So for 3 psukim, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are alive, all 3 of them together. So there's an inyan of eternity, of ad olam, of something that's going to be lasting forever. And so this is really like a very special Shabbos to tune into that. And even if it's just you and your children, or even if it's just you alone, but you want to have children, you want to have grandchildren. So, you should go over and say that pasuk a few times, and you should look inside the psukim and pay special attention in Rishon and the Kriyas Torah when those psukim are mentioned. Because that kind of tying, that kind of binding up together really puts things, bekviyas, together inside. However, tonight Tonight is not about the Avos. Maybe a little bit about Yitzchak. But tonight, like we sent out today, it's really all about Rivka, who's mamish become my favorite. She's become my favorite in the world. And there's so much to share about her, because on the one hand she's so revealed, and on the other hand she is so mysterious. The reason behind her being chosen to be the one for Yaakov, for Yitzchak Avinu, is very mysterious, although we touched upon it last week when Eliezer describes meeting her using the words Ba'avo Hayom El Ha'ayin, that he met her by the well, and really the Torah uses the word there, El Ha'ayin. He came and he met her in her eyes, mamish, by looking into her eyes. There's something incredible about her. So, keep all this in mind as I ask you the following, as I ask myself, and I ask all of us the following question. And it's not like a question where you say, "Oh yeah, me." It's like, even, if you want to, it's cool, but if you don't have to. Did you ever know that there's really, really something very special about yourself? But it'd be nuts if you walk, if you like, okay, I'm gonna walk around telling people that I know there's something special about myself, right? Did you ever sense that there's something about you that you had to keep in a secret, actually? That there was something so incredible about you, but it had to remain, like you couldn't share with anybody. Rabbi Shlomo taught us the name of Rabbi Nachman in Likutei Mahar. I'm not sure where it is actually, because I've tried to find it, the source for it in a few places. But based on Breslov, Rabbi Shlomo taught that when you have something beautiful, a secret between you and God, and you don't share it with somebody else, you just keep it between you and the Ribono Shleilim, that secret makes you, it makes you more and more beautiful. We learned it a few times. That's the real meaning of attaining godly beauty. That when you hold on to this secret between you and Hashem, that makes you more pretty. And then on the contrary, when you have a secret, and you know it inside of you. Doesn't matter how you know it inside of you, and then you just can't wait to tell it to somebody else. Then Reb Shlomo says it's like you vomited it, excuse my language, you mamish barfed it out of yourself. Okay? So Reb Shlomo said it takes a lot of strength to hold on to a secret. Like when you do something good for somebody, or we were privileged to do a beautiful act in the world. So the question isn't were you able to do that beautiful thing or not. The question is, were you able to not tell anybody afterwards that you did such a beautiful thing? That's really the test. Were you able to just keep it between you guys? That's what it really boils down to. Hey, there's chairs in that corridor there. Just grab a towel or something, because the thing might be a little bit wet. I'm sorry. I'm so happy you're here, though.
Me too.
So, you obviously see where we're going with this. Rivka knows she's very, very special. She's not sure why. And she knows it for a very, very long time. Very long time. And she doesn't share anything with anybody for a very long time. And we'll get to that in a second. But she knows that there's something very special about her. And, Chazal, there's a beautiful midrash. I had to write it down because I didn't want to lose the wording. Chazal say about the Rivka dafka, the midrash, Me'olam lo niskak HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'siach im ha'isha. Chazal say, Hashem never needed to speak to any woman in the Torah, Ela im otsa hatzadekes, except for that tzadekes called Rivka. God doesn't need to speak to any of the mothers, any of the women in the Torah. This is not a chauvinistic concept. It is what it is. Okay, this is just what's in front of us. Except for the Ribono Shleilim speaks to Rivka. And Chazal also say, you know what Rivka's name was? You know she had a nickname. You know what her name was? Shoshana ben Hachochim. They called her Shoshana ben Hachochim. What is Shoshana ben Hachochim? Like a rose amongst the thorns, which is exactly what she was that rose amongst the thorns in the house of Betuel, right? In the house of Lavan, not exactly a place of road, but not exactly roses. It's not exactly so pashut. So she's known as the Shoshana ben Achochim, and she's the only one that God speaks to. And we'll see what exactly Hashem tells her, and at what moment in life. Further, when you look at the three Avos, Yitzchak and Rivka, about their relationship is mind-blowing. Why? Because it's the only relationship where there was no additional wife. Remember that nice thing that happens once in a while in the Torah? When there's only one man and one woman, and no one else gets involved, right? They're the only couple that doesn't... Lahefech. When did shvachot come inside? When did maidservants begin the whole geschäft of joining the family? When the mother couldn't give birth, like with Sarah. So what happens? She takes Hagar, ulai ibana mimena. I can't understand that till today, that she would feel that she's shayach to this birth of Ishmael by taking a maidservant and say, here, be with my husband, and I'll feel like it's mine. But anyway, it starts with that. She's barren, so she says, come, Hagar. Come, we'll do it like that. Then by Yaakov, obviously, Rachel and Leah, that whole balagan, and then all the other, tribes that come from Bilhah and Zilpah. But Yitzchak and Rivka, they have a similar problem. They can't get pregnant. How long? 20 years. And what happens? We read it this morning in Shul. Where does Yitzchak daven for a baby? Lenochach ishto. He doesn't go to another room and say, find me someone that will work with. Lenochach ishto. Even though Rashi says they kind of went to different corners in the room, but from the pshat of the pasuk is that he's davening right in front of his wife Rivka, and he's saying to the Ribono Shel Olam, it's this woman. I want it only from her, not from anybody else. So their relationship just on that is enough to just speak volumes about that. What an incredible thing, what an incredible concept. And there's one really weird thing in their relationship. We said before that the Ribono Shel Olam chose to speak only to Rivka. But between Yitzchak and Rivka, there's only one conversation recorded in the whole Torah. And in fact, it lasts for one pasuk. It was just crazy. Because it's not like he met her when she was older in her life. How old was she when they met?
3.
Probably 3, right? And she's around for a while. Okay, Yitzchak meets her at 37, 38, and he lives for another 142 years. And the Torah only records one conversation between the two of them, as much as we know. And what conversation is that? We'll talk about that also in a second. One conversation which lasts for one pasuk. You would think that's a pretty, which is very different from Sarah and from Rachel and Leah. If they had something to say, they weren't exactly shy. They totally said what was on their mind. But you have to understand that from the moment that Rivka meets Yitzchak, she's meeting him, and according to the Netziv, it sets the tone for the rest of their relationship. When she sees Yitzchak, what does she do? She falls off, and she intuitively, she covers herself. It wasn't even like, and she turns to Eliezer and she says, who is this person that I'm feeling the need to cover myself in front of? Almost like she senses immediately. This is kind of connected to what we were learning in Rav Kook's Shiur. We touched upon last week a concept called Musar Klayot, which means that which your intuition knows so clearly about the Ribono Shel Olam and about Kedusha in this world, and you don't know where you know it from, but it's like, I wouldn't say common sense, but common like Yiddish sense, common moral Yiddish sense. Where you feel something so, it's like, what is this? Why am I feeling this? She's so sensible, she so feels Kedusha. I mean, again, what is she seeing? She's seeing someone who just came down from Har Moriah, right? That was after the Akedah. She's seeing someone who just came down from Har Moriah, and from then he can't find his place in the world. He's wandering around. His father says, you can't find anybody to marry. I'm going to find someone. You just stay here and you daven. She comes into the prog, she comes and sees, oh my God. She sees someone that she could sense, he's made out of something, I can't believe it. And she turns to Eliezer and says, who is this person that why was my natural reaction to come and cover myself? What was that about? And she's beginning to understand, wow, there's more in me, I'm made out, I can't believe I sense such Kedusha. Such an incredible thing, and that sets the tone for the rest of their relationship, because she's always in awe of him. Not afraid of him, but she knows that this person that she was destined to marry, he already kind of was living half in that world and half in this world after the Akedah. I would say, actually, he was living more in that world and less in this world from the time that she's with him. And she's humbled by this incredible, incredible man. And yes, the Torah says records only one conversation between them. But you know what? The Torah, the Tanakh, only uses the term love between one couple in the whole Torah. And that's Yitzchak and Rivka. Last Shabbos, when he takes her to his mother's tent, it says, Vayinachem achavei vaye'ahavea. And he mamish loved her. So even though we don't know a lot about what's going on between them, Torah doesn't record so much. But it's enough for us to see that one word in last Shabbos that says, Vaye'aveh, to know there's something incredible going on. So, we can learn a lot of different things about this. A lot of different things about this. First of all, I'm dedicating tonight's Shiur. I should do it every week, but definitely tonight to my wife, to Vina, for making the house so beautiful once again, like she always does. And this should be a sgula for everyone, for every bait in Am Yisrael, to continue to always search for the place where they could connect to this love and awe that existed between Yitzchak and Rivka. Really between all the Avot and Imahot, but tonight we're really talking about Yitzchak and Rivka. So Rivka's whole life, she knows something incredible is happening to her. And in a weird way, she comes from such a dark place, and yet she's the one that if it wasn't for her, the brachas that made you and I sitting here today learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael would have gone to somebody else, which means you and I would not be sitting here right now learning Torah. This is very important to remember. The brachas that are in this parsha, V'yiten lecha Elokim mitala shamayim mishmane aretz v'rov dagan v'tirosh, the brachas which were given to Yaakov Avinu, had they not been given to Yaakov Avinu, that would have changed the course of everything. Everything was dependent on those brachas, which chasdei shamayim, thank God, Rivka went against her nature and made sure that those brachas would come together, and that you and I can sit here and learn Torah tonight. It got to be very clear. Those brachas enabled us to be here. There's a lot of moments in the Torah where you realize, wow, if that small thing didn't happen, then none of us would be here. For instance, and it's usually not the things we think about all the time. It's not like, oh, if Avram didn't do a bris with Hashem. It's talking about other things we don't notice all the time, how determining they were for the continuation of our lineage, right? And of our history, our past, present, and future. There's another point in the Torah later on, I think it's in Parashat Vayeshev, where it happens again, where you realize, oh my God, had that not happened, there's no way in the world we would have continued. Where does it happen? Yosef and his brothers. It says that when they went running away from him, so Yosef, it says he goes and he finds an ish to'eba sadeh in the field. Rashi says it's actually Gavriel HaMalach, and he says, where are my brothers? And if that ish, Gavriel, didn't tell them they went there, he wouldn't have gone to look for them, which means they wouldn't have found him, they wouldn't have sold him, and then everything would have continued in a different way. So each of these moments are critical moments, not in the forming of the Jewish people, in the forming of you and me, in the forming of us sitting here right now, which makes it so incredibly, even more incredibly personal and powerful. So did you ever wonder for a second what Rivka was thinking when she was chosen? I mean, she stopped for a second, and she probably heard the whole story of Avram and Eliezer. And what does Avram tell Eliezer to find? Like, let's talk about Rivka for a second. What is so special about her? And Chavra, I know we're throwing a lot of questions out there, but you'll see how this whole thing with Rat Hashem hopefully will come to a nice magal. Avram Avinu tells Eliezer, he says, listen, here, there's nobody here for my son. Where should you go? Go to where I came from. That's where you'll find a woman for my son Yitzchak. That's a bit peculiar, because Avram Avinu was told, Lech lecha me'aretzecha, leave all of that and come here to Eretz Canaan, right? And what does Avram tell Eliezer? No. Not from Canaan. You don't take a girl from Canaan. Take from Aram Naharaim. Take an Aramite. They're the ones. You'll find them there. And Rivka is spending her first, I don't know how long of her life, probably wondering, why me? Why me? Why did he tell him to come out to get me? And why did he tell? And if you think about it, let's think for 1 second. You think Avram Avinu didn't have a good meidla, a good shidduch for Yitzchak where he was? I mean, think about this for a second. I mean, I can only give a good comparison to the following. If you've ever been to a successful Chabad house in the world, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Obviously, all Chabad houses are successful, right? So you've been to a Chabad house that's successful, right? You know, when Torah says, Ve'es hanefesh asher asu becharan, that Avram and Sarah left and they came to Eretz Yisrael with what? With the nefesh that they did made in Haran, meaning what? With all the kirun they did and all their successful from projects, for lack of better, using a better terminology. They were doing good. They were succeeding. They had plenty of people. They had plenty of really special people around them. They were successful. Avram could have chosen any one of the nefashot asher asu becharan. He could have chosen anybody that was around him. And yet Avram Avinu says, no one's here, go there. So I once heard a beautiful, beautiful parish about this. And it has to do, it's a very touchy subject. We're not going to go into it too much, but it's a very beautiful, it's a touchy subject, but it's beautiful. There's a world of difference between midos and hashkafa. Midos means characteristic traits, and hashkafa means outlook. Now let me ask you, Stam, you think about this, it could be a different answer for different people. When you're looking for your shidduch, or when you had looked for your shidduch, or when you spoke to the, what do you call it? Shidduch macher? Shadchan, right. How do you say it in Brooklyn? My aunt, right? That's how you say it in Brooklyn. You spoke to your aunt, right? So, where was the dagesh? What was the emphasis when you looked for a shidduch? Was it hashkafa? Was it midos? Then be real with yourself. And be real with it. What is it today in the world? Like usually, when someone's told, the first thing, if you talk about how good of a midos, how good her midos are, she's probably not for me. You're just trying to sell me on the fact that she has good characteristic traits. But hashkafa, what's hashkafa? Oh, what kind of home do we want? Where do we want to send our children to? What kind of school? Will we feel comfortable with the same type of yarmulke we want our sons to wear? Or whatever it is. However, hashkafa takes a very big chunk of the picture sometimes. Now, there's no right or wrong here. I'm just throwing stuff out. When it came to the women of Canaan versus the women of Aram Naharaim, Avram Avinu knew hashkafically, absolutely, outlook-wise, in Canaan, they were much more on page with what Avram Avinu want. But midos-wise, Avram Avinu says, I came from that place. Hashkafically, I had to reorient myself, my outlook. But midos-wise, characteristic traits, I came from there. So I know that it exists, that you could be from such a rotten place, hashkafically, outlook-wise, but inside, you're made out of something incredible. A hashkafa is much easier to reorient than a bad midah. This is not my saying. The Baalei HaMusar say this all over the place. The Baalei HaMusar teach many times that Ashrei Ha'ish, praiseworthy is the person who spends their whole life through this world and is able to mamish metaken one midah. They're able to fix one characteristic trait, just one thing. So I heard, I forget the name of who, but like, you know what Canaan comes from? What word Canaan comes from? Lachnia, to submit, right? It's like what was going on in Eretz Yisrael. God was the in thing to do. Avram Avinu had a whole kiruv machine, and the moment God was like the in thing to do, you're able to machnia your yetzer. You're able to subdue your yetzer in the moment for the you're able to change your hashkafa in the moment for whatever was going on at that time. But maybe 20 years later, if things would have been different, people of Canaan would have just continued with something different. Midas-wise, a midah, when you're born with an inherent characteristic trait that's pure, that's something you can't just reorient. Rivka's made out of that. Rivka, maybe the first few years, was trying to understand why me? Why me? But she was taken by the awe, by the awesome privilege of being married to someone who was kind of like already on a mizbeach, sacrificed up to God, but was still here in this world. And for 20 years she's davening. And maybe during those 20 years she's thinking, oh my God, I know what's going to happen. He's going to do to me what his father did. And he's going to bring someone else in. And what does she see? Lenochach ishta. He's davening in the same room with me. He's davening in front of me. He wants me to be the one. And he's not going to settle on anything else. And this is what she sees. And she finally gets married. But what happens? Vayisrotzetzu habanim bekirba. Now look how tricky the pasuk is here. This is so tricky. It's so like, you want to go to the Torah like, I see what you did with my mind. Look at this. This is amazing. Rivka's walking around, and the boys, the Torah says, are jumping around inside her. And Rashi says there, what happens? She passes by a shul, and she feels like the baby wants to come out. Then she passes by a place of avodah zarah, and what happens? She feels like a baby wants to come out, right? So she goes, but she goes to where? Where does she go to cry her eyes out? To the Beis Medrash of shame. And she says, Vatomer im kain. If this is so, lama ze anochi. If this is so, that I have no shalom in my stomach because I have a confused fetus. Did I say anything that's confusing right now? That last statement that I just said?
Single and plural.
Rivka thinks it's just one confused fetus. How do we know that? Because what's the answer she gets from God? Vehine shnei goyim bevitnech. Shnei leumim mime'ayich yiparedu. Uleom milom ye'ematz. V'rav yavod tza'ir. Rivka thinks, she's like, oh my God, I have such a confused fetus. Sometimes it wants to mamish daven all day long in a shul. And sometimes it wants to mamish be on the, I don't want to say what. And she counts, she's like, this is what I was schlepped. They schlepped out there to Aram Naharaim for me? A person who's carrying in its womb a confused fetus? Vatelech lidrosh es Hashem. And she goes to daven. Says, what is this? Im ken lama ze anochi. Why me? A person like, why me? If this is what I'm carrying inside of me. Why me? So, what happens? That's the moment that Hashem speaks to her. Vayomer Hashem la. God speaks to her and says, no. It's not a confused fetus. Rather what? It's two. And according to the Baal Tanya, in the beginning of Tanya, it's either the third or the fourth chapter, the Baal Tanya speaks about these two fetuses as being the nefesh elokis and the nefesh bahamis, the animalistic soul and the godly soul, that are constantly at war with each other, constantly wrestling with each other. The Mamish uses the example from what Rivka was told by God. Rivka was told by God, what's going on in your stomach is essentially what every Yidla is going to be going through the rest of his life. This is a very Lubavitch Perush, okay? This is a very Lubavitch Perush. That forever there's going to be tension between what a Yid really wants to do in his neshama versus what his animalistic soul is constantly driving him to do on the outside, forever. And when she hears this, she's even more freaked out in a beautiful way. Why? Because what is she told? Ule'om mil'om ve'rav ya'avod tza'ir. The older one, the greater one, the bigger one, will be subservient to the younger one. And Rivka holds on to this secret for 63 years. Remember I asked you in the beginning, did you ever have to hold on to a secret from God? Maybe she spoke a lot to Yitzchak, maybe she didn't. All I know is what the Torah tells us. And when does she speak out? When does Rivka finally speak out? When she says to her husband, look what our older son did. He took these two women already, and Rashi says there that Yitzchak became blind from all the smoke that was coming up from their Avodah Zarah practicing in the house. That's what Rashi says. They would practice Avodah Zarah, they would light incense to foreign, to worshipping idols, and the smoke, this is one of the opinions, Mamish made Yitzchak blind in his eyes. Rivka is saying to Yitzchak, saying, listen, you want this to happen to Yaakov too? We got to get him out of here. We got to get him to go find a woman somewhere. And where do they send Yaakov to go find a woman? The last place in the world. You'd think that they'd also be sending him to get a woman from. Why? Because midos you're born with, there's something so incredible about it. Even though hashkafically, you'll have, just look at Rachel and Leah, what they had to go through, the house that they grew up in, but the midos were there. These inherent midos were in them. Hashkafically, Yaakov could mekarev a rock, right? Yaakov can mekarev like a lamp. He's not worried about hashkafa right now, but he's also sent. So Rivka holds on for 63 years and doesn't say a word about what she was told by God. And I always wondered, do you think she felt like she was living a double life those 63 years? You know, some people, they say, wow, I got to do something really, really big in the world, but it's going to be against my nature, so I have to work really, really hard in order to tune into my nature. But we've already learned many times that by us Yidlach, our nature is to shift. That is, our nature is not to take that one quality which usually defines us. It's dafka to take that one quality that usually defines us and shape it over.
What do you mean shape it over?
You'll see. You'll see. It's perfect.
Isn't then it to say that she thought the whole time that Yitzchak also knew? That's why it wasn't like she was keeping a secret. She thought that he knew because he was so kadosh that she assumed that if I got it, of course he got it. She never spoke to him about it because she thought that he also had the nibuah, and only when Yaakov goes to steal the bracha, she realizes, oh my God, he doesn't know.
He doesn't, right. But the thing is, what doesn't she think? She doesn't think that Yitzchak knows that she knows.
Oh, okay.
Meaning, she said, she assumed whatever holy she knew, of course he knew. He's an oilet mima. It's not like she knew something that he didn't, but it's that he doesn't. How could I tell him that God spoke to me? Okay, now, but again, what's so mind-blowing about this, by the way, we haven't even gotten to the text that I realize we're probably not going to get there tonight, but it's okay. Is everyone okay with just flowing?
But why
Yeah?
didn't she feel free to tell her husband that God spoke to her?
It wasn't a matter of free or not. It wasn't like she felt, it's not that she felt chained. It wasn't like we said before, it's not a matter of, I'm trying to find the right word.
From the beginning that she was in awe of him.
It was awe. It wasn't, it wasn't, what would be a better way of explaining this?
I mean, I understand the beautiful imagery of she's keeping a secret that's hers. It's between her and the Borah.
Right.
But Naomi. But what you and Naomi discussed right now is that something different, which is not that she's keeping a secret between her and the Borah, but there's actually a secret that she thought that Yitzchak didn't know that she knew. And that adds a whole other dimension that I don't really understand how that's...
Not that I claim to understand any of it either, you understand.
No, that's
this
okay,
is a very...
but that's okay.
Yeah, it's a very deep concept we're
But
saying.
I'm trying to understand, okay, why wouldn't she feel the freedom to... It's no longer between her and the Boreh, it's between her and Yitzchak. That's the dynamic here that I didn't get.
Why aren't they communicating that?
Why could she?
Why? Okay, if it's a secret between her and the Boreh, okay. But why, if she doesn't feel like she can tell Yitzchak that God spoke to her as well? Why?
Well,
that doesn't feel like awe, and that doesn't feel like...
There's one thing I could say. I think that the only thing that comes to my mind right now is that maybe she was scared that she'd be belittling his mother, which he loved so much, by showing him that, you didn't talk to your mommy, but he's talking to me. Well, 1 second. And I don't want to go too much on it, but that's one thing that I could just imagine, because her awe and her modesty is what defines her from the moment we know about her. Her chesed and her modesty is what defines her from the moment that we know of her. So the only thing I could think of for now is maybe that really there was this tension that like she meets a very, very, very broken person. As much as he was in the Shamayim, he was down here broken. And how do we know that how broken he really was? Because what's the first thing he does? The Torah says when he meets her. He brings her into her mother's tent, and then he's finally comforted. It's like a very clear thing that she's filling a real interesting role, which obviously modern psychology has picked up on this a lot, that men marry their mothers, the whole thing, whatever. But there's a lot going on there. So I think maybe it really could be that not that they had it's not that they couldn't talk to each other. There's something much deeper than this on the surface. But what you're saying is, I'm sure there's room for a question like that, and I'm sure that the tzaddikim speak about it all over the place. I'm sure. I don't want to belittle your question for a second, because it's an awesome question. But that's what I think it is. For tonight's share, that's what I think it is. Yeah.
I can understand her holding on to the privacy of a conversation with God. I think if I had one, no one else would know about it either. But I'm thinking she could have maybe just described Esav's behavior, and describes, I could tell your husband what your kids do wrong, what your kids do right. And because especially that he couldn't see, that he wasn't observing them, and she could have been a place of information for him to know whom to choose.
She could have been a million things. I don't know how to relate I don't know how to begin to respond to that question. I mean, this is definitely not we're not going to sit here and critique Rivka for 1 second. I especially prefaced everything by saying in the beginning that from a young age, this relationship is different than the first and the third. This is something else that's going on, and it's all based, like the Netziv does say, that moment of meeting him and asking herself, wow, why am I in such awe from such a person? Who is this person that I'm in such awe from? That is the hakdama for the rest of that's what the rest of their life is going to be like. Until one moment. Until a certain moment. And this I learned from this, I don't even know her name, but there's this Rebbitzin, I was listening to a shiur from today, and I don't even know her name, but she brought down something incredible. When people get married, when the first zivug in the Torah, when God says man shouldn't be alone, so it says, Eselo Ezer Kenegdo. What's an Ezer? What does it mean to help someone? It means to relieve someone from something that they're going, to relieve the burden from them. I'm going to help them, right? That's what it usually means. Eselo Ezer Kenegdo. I'm going to relieve them and just make them not work too hard. That's not a soulmate. A soulmate is Ezer Kenegdo. I'm going to relieve a person from trying to figure out so hard on their own who they are by being Kenegdo. By forcing them to learn how to shift their nature. You hear the difference? I mean, do you hear that? Chanasara, do you hear so far? And we're going to see how this works in a second. Because obviously, what was the midah of Yitzchak? Everybody knows. What was Yitzchak known for? Gvura. What was Rivka known for? Chesed. Obviously, she comes from the same place Avram came from. Shir midah is chesed. And for more than 63 years. For 83 years, right? Even more. For about 86 years, that midah of chesed is the one which was her nature, which is what she worked through all the time. Now there's a tarla in the beginning in Even Shlomo, and it shows up in the middle of the parsha. It says Vayeshev Yitzchak Bigrar. After Avram Avinu dies, Yitzchak also begins to learn the secret of shifting. He also started doing things that his father would do. He also started changing a little bit too. How do we know this? Because he started redigging wells that his father had dug. And wait a second, if you love Esav so much, right, you can't, if you have gvura, you're not going to love someone that's acting off. But if you have chesed, maybe you could even be open to loving someone that's very off. So we see a big shift in Yitzchak's whole geschäft too towards chesed. Rivka still doesn't know when to turn on that shift. And that's what we said, that for 63 years she's carrying this secret and she's not really sure what to do with it or how to implement it in her life. But what happens? The Ribono Shel Olam prepares the scene for what happens in our parsha of all the mischievous behavior and all the what seems to be cheating and stealing and disguising for one reason. For Yitzchak and Rivka to become a complete zivug. And how do you become a complete zivug? If you fulfill the job of being Ezer Kenegdo. If you're able to somehow complement each other to the extent that which is the hardest thing for you to become, meaning changing of your nature, takes place. Rivka, chesed, 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 chesed. Do you know how hard it was for her to tell Yaakov to go get the bracha? It was probably the hardest day of her life. But what did she see? That if she does not tune in to the gvura that she needs to tune into, then she's not fulfilling the mission for that which she was schlepped from Aram Naharaim for, which was to be the mother of Klal Yisrael. And she's definitely not going to fulfill the mission of the nevuah which was told to her by Hashem when she was pregnant. In other words, she's holding on for 63 years, and at a certain point it comes in, you come to a test. It's not going to be like, oh, when is this just going to happen? It's more like, when am I going to make sure that what was told to me all those years ago is going to happen? And that's the point of tonight. That's the point of Rivka, and that's the point of anyone who carries within them a secret from Hashem, a besora. Now when I say secret from Hashem, I'm not referring to, this refers to anyone who was walking on the street and then they saw an owl through a window that spoke to them in Swahili and they understood what it meant, and now they're going to go share the world what that owl told in the middle of the night. I'm not talking crazy stuff here, okay? I'm talking really down here in this world. Each of us has something in our insides of our insides, if we would just be quiet enough and present enough to hear and understand that which is whispered to me. But just like Rivka, I won't hear it unless Vatelech Lidr es Hashem. Something's riling up inside of you. Instead of being like, what is this? You go to the Beis Medrash and you start crying. Vatomer im ken lama ze anochi. What is me? Lama ze anochi. Why am I the way I am? Lama ze anochi. Why am I acting the way I'm acting? Why do I feel the way I feel? you go and you cry it out. God says to you in your own life, at a certain point, you'll see that you're going to have to shift. Just like the younger one is going to shift over and rule over the older one, and that's going to be a natural thing that's going to shift in nature, your nature is going to have to shift as well. Many of us are told to accomplish great things. We feel great things. We feel we're destined for greatness. We feel there's something special about us from a very young age sometimes. And yet we're sitting around waiting for it to happen. And that's a pagan concept. A Yiddish concept. A Jewish concept is always davening to Hashem, not let me make sure that I see when everything that was promised to me will be coming true. But it's that please, Rebbeinu Shalom, at the moment where I can really shift my nature and change who I am, the nature of me. For your sake, let me not miss on that opportunity. And for 63 years, that was probably Rivka's silent prayer while she was holding on to that secret. Asking herself in the beginning, why me? Because I have a midah inside of me. I have something so incredible in me. By the way, when did Avram Avinu shift his nature? At what moment in his life? Well, if your attribute is chesed and you're able to take a knife to try to shecht your son, you're probably doing okay with shifting your nature. Probably. And we see this by all the gedolim, by all the great, great ones. There's always a zeh le'umad zeh. In this world, it's not that nothing is black or white, but there's always the need for balancing the functions as strong as they can. And a zivug is what that is all about. An ezer kenegdo, not an ezer. Our wives, our husbands, they're not just ezers, they help me. They did the dishes when I was very tired. I'm not knocking that, that's a very beautiful thing, very holy thing. That's not what we're talking about. That's nice. But you can get a maid to do that. To shift your nature? To be a vessel, to make you complete to the level like Yitzchak and Rivka were completing each other? Like that? That's already something else. So Rivka, all the Torah needs to show us one conversation that takes place between Yitzchak and Rivka their whole life. But that one conversation, that one pasuk, shows us what a true and real zivug really is. Leading each other to get to that place. But to just focus on Rivka, she lives a whole life thinking, I'm not worthy. This is all a matnas chinam. And by the way, who also felt like that they're really not worthy, but I have to do it, and this is the way God wants it. Who else acts like this in this parsha too? I'm not worthy for such greatness, but I'm going to be pushed into this. Yaakov. Reb Shlomo has a whole Torah in Evan Shlomo that when Rivka comes and tells him, okay, listen, I heard, and the Midrash says that she heard in Ruach HaKodesh. Not that she was waiting over there listening to conversation. The Midrash says she heard in Ruach HaKodesh that Yitzchak's about to get the brachas, and that the whole pace of Jewish history, Jewish future, is now going to be shifted to a different nation, a nation of murder. And by the way, I just want to say something very important. We always say, Yitzchak loved Esav and Rivka loved Yaakov. Just as important for everybody to know. Rivka was a great mama to Esav as well. In fact, the day that Avram Avinu died, where was Yitzchak? He was out in the field. He killed a certain somebody. Who did he kill? Esav. Who did he kill? Nimrod. And he got hold of his begadim, of his cloths, which he didn't trust any of his wives with to take good care of. The Gemara tells us, who did he trust it with? With his mother to wash and dry it. He felt close enough to take that which meant the most to him and Dafka bring it to his mother. She's incredible. She's incredible for some reason because of that pasuk where it says, "Vayehav Yitzchak es Esav kitzayid befiv, veRivka es Yaakov." We think that means that she didn't play a motherly role for Esav. It's not true. But imagine if you're told while your babies are still inside of you, It's all about really one of them. How are you supposed to act the rest of your life? Knowing this inside. It's not a simple secret to carry. One of your sons, he's going to be the conqueror of the other one.
We're for 63 years?
What's that?
That seems to be a lifelong assignment for us.
Oh, that's gewalt. That's gewalt. And maybe it is. Yeah, that's incredible. I would say, yeah, that's actually amazing.
There's shifting that happens slowly over the course of 62 years, and then there's the shift that happens in an instant.
And I would say they're both subconscious. Like they both, that shifting that happens. I don't think she realized wow, look at me. I'm able to hold on to still loving my son, even though I know. It's more like this just became ingrained in her more and more and more. Then that moment of saying Ad Kan, that nevuah that God Himself told me, I got to make sure it takes place. That also happens like that. But when she comes and tells Yaakov, listen, you got to do it right now. So there's the whole teaching in Even Shlomo where Rivka says to Yaakov, you have to learn how to shift. What do you mean? Because Yaakov Avinu said, I'm not worthy of these brachas. Rabbi Shlomo says a holy man is someone that when you tell him, listen, these great things are coming your way, destined for huge things, for brachas. What's a sign of an evil person? They say, you know what, I mamish agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. You know those people that get the call to be honorees at a shul dinner? You could always tell who really doesn't want it and who feels they deserve it and who they don't, by the responses, right? Let's just act it out. Listen, Mr. So-and-so, we want to honor you and your wife for the incredible truma you've done for our shul. Oh no, I don't know. I definitely, I can't. What date is it? Like those kind of things, or you could even tell by the way they say, "I'm not worthy." Like you ever hear those rabbanim that they start their speeches for 20 minutes talking about how low they are and how much they're not worthy to speak, but then they pull out a Megillah out of their pockets and they have the biggest speech they prepared, even though they're not. Then you have people that they really feel like they're not worthy. Yaakov Avinu mamish felt that he wasn't worthy. I'm not worthy to get those brachas. Rivka says, now! You got to do this now! Rivka, Hishis said, come camels, come drink. Now, do this. Yaakov Avinu looks at his mother, oh my God, she got it. She's mamish my father's zivuk. She knows, she tapped into the midah of my father. And she does it right away. She gets him to do it right away. And he does it. From the moment she meets her husband, that feeling that happens to her when falling off the camel and covering herself describes the rest of her life. So yeah, what you brought up, Ahava, is a very important thing to look into. But and we're not going to analyze like really how great, how amazing were they able to, what was their level of conversation. How articulate were they with each other. We know that we're dealing with a neshama kimat lo me'olam hazeh, almost not from this world, with Yitzchak Avinu. And Rivka's whole life is being in awe of such a person. But you know what she remembers her whole life? That this person was in awe of me. Because those 20 years we were crying to have children, he wouldn't leave the room and he would daven with me. And he would always say to Ribono Shel Olam in front of her, not like my parents, not like they did it. This one. This is the one. I only want it from her. I only want it from her. So it's almost like those three psukim when Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are alive. I think was like the hachana for one zivug to mamish get it together. And just not to throw any guilt to our chaver that are learning with us in Chutz La'aretz, but where they got it together. It's the only couple that was only in Eretz Yisrael. They were only together in Eretz Yisrael. In the middle of the beginning of the Torah, this Shabbos, it says, okay, he's going to, Vayhi Rav Ba'aretz, there's a famine, I'm going to start to go down. God says, your thing is only here. Yitzchak never leaves Eretz Yisrael. And he acts as a zivug with his wife in Eretz Yisrael, and only in Eretz Yisrael. So the schut of us being in Eretz Yisrael, and the schut of the chassan in the room. You're getting married in Israel, right? No pressure? Yeah. And where you gonna live? Baltimore? Nah.
Yeah, Baltimore.
No. Huh?
He's scared.
You gotta be really scared. Anyway, the schus of the zivugim happening in Eretz Yisrael should be a big refuah to the Makkah, which is called thinking that life gets boring too fast, and that you should really be blessed. You should really, really have a big bracha, a big schus of Yitzchak and Rivka, of always being in awe of each other, and always davening with each other, lenochach ishto, and always davening with each other, never davening alone in closed rooms, but to always show that, like Yitzchak saying to God, it's this one. This is the one that I want all the brachas to come through all the time. Let's remind each other that all the time. coming. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll see you with Hashem next Monday night. Mazel tov.